Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is John Maxwell, and this is my fuels inventory and management final presentation for the Yakima Delta Wildlife Management Area and Chamna Natural Preserve in Tri-Cities, Washington. The Yakima River Delta was occupied by the Shamnapum Native American tribe prior to European migration in the mid to late 1800s. Farming began in the area in 1872, but proved unsuccessful due to the lack of control of water in the floodplain. The construction and subsequent completion in the 1950s of the McNary Dam downstream on the Columbia River created the Wallulu Lake and transformed much of the landscape. Farming was abandoned, and control of the area was transformed to the Corps of Engineers. The Yakima River Delta Management Area includes 1,000 acres of land owned and maintained by the Corps of Engineers, with large portions of the periphery leased to the City of Richland. The area is managed for recreation and wildlife purposes. Hiking, kayaking, and biking trails traverse the area. The delta is a critical part of the Columbia River watershed salmon run. Waterfowl and migratory bird flock to this area. The Yakima Delta sits in a small sliver of land that is not agriculturally available in the Columbia Basin. Like much of the Hanford Reach National Monument slightly to the northwest, the delta sits in fire regime condition class with greatest return intervals. The National Monument fire decreased native vegetation by up to 90% according to some estimates based on size, intensity, and severity in 2000. Fires on the shrub steppe are frequent in non-irrigated areas. The Yakima River Delta includes several islands with riverbanks, floodplain, wetlands, and shrubs. Bateman Island is part of the area and includes 160 acres that were almost entirely burned in 2017. Much of the riverbanks are dominated by Russian olive, a non-native tree species that is prevalent in riparian areas. The tree has spread along major waterways throughout the interior western United States. It crowds out important native riparian vegetation and continues to grow and spread throughout eastern Washington. The Yakima Delta Wildlife Management Area is a component of the United States Corps of Engineers Walla Walla District. The Ice Harbor Natural Resources Management Office is responsible for the federal land. The Tapteel Greenway, a local nonprofit, manages the Shamna Natural Preserve. The name is derived from the Lewis and Clark expedition through the area. An unattended campfire burned the majority of the canopy fuels on Bateman Island. The surrounding area has a lengthy fire history. Areas near interstate and state highways are particularly vulnerable during late summer drought conditions. Dominant canopy species in the delta include water birch, Gary oak, cottonwood, and an abundance of Russian olive. Sagebrush dominates the undergrowth, along with native grasses and cheatgrass. The purpose of the field project is to give an accurate description of the fire potential in the wild and urban interface in the Yakima Delta and the Tri-Cities, Washington. It is important to look at how the city is prepared for this space. It is also important to see if the fire on Bateman Island in 2017 is indicative of what is probable for the rest of the acreage. The impact of Russian olive is also worthy of consideration. Its dominance in the delta and Hanford Reach to the north changes the fire hazard. The Hanford Reach marks the only free-flowing portion of the Columbia River in the United States. Standard materials were used in the field inventory process. The sample plot location showing proximity to Highway 240 and the Yakima River. Systematic sampling was conducted by selecting the first point in the northern corridor of the sampling area. After that, a plot was established with uniform spacing through the area moving south and east along the bank of the Yakima River. This method was used for the ease of locating points on the ground and the representative nature of the landscape as it moved away from the river, allowing for a uniform spacing over the entire area. The population is also randomly distributed across the landscape in that sense. The 9 plots are included with their location on the site, shade, slope, aspect, and description. There's very little slope in this area. Each sample plot included 0.02 hectares or 0.05 acres, 46.5 by 46.5 square feet. The month of April, the time was after 1400 but before 1600, with a relative humidity of 30% and a temperature of 72 degrees. The planar intercept method from Brown et al. 1974 was used because of the comprehensive detail when conducting a field inventory. Surface fuels data was collected during the field inventory by count. The values for average diameter are in the Brown 1974 tables, and sampling plane length was constant for each site at 0.02 hectares or 0.05 acres. The lack of slope in the region made the slope correction factor nil. The crown biomass was estimated using the allometric equations developed by Brown 1978 and the lookup tables in Brown et al. 1977. The dBH was measured on site to derive the 1 hour through 1,000 hour fuel calculations for the site. Find dead fuel moisture content as determined from the input-output tables in the National Wildfire Coordinating Group, Fireline Handbook 2006. Equations for EMC, adjusted EMC, 1 hour fuel moisture content, and 10-hour fuel moisture content developed from National Fire Danger Rating System equations. The field inventory for each of the plots was plugged into the equation to get the 1 hour, 10 hour, 100 hour, and 1,000 hour fuels, as well as the total fuel loading for the surface fuels in tons per acre. The results are summarized with mean, median, standard deviation, standard error, and variance. The canopy fuels were determined using the Brown lookup tables and adjusted for foliage, 1 hour fuel loading, 10 hour, and total fuel loading. The pounds per acre of canopy fuels is summarized. A late summer fire is the most likely and would primarily be due to high heat and drought conditions causing minimal flow in the Yakima River and prolonged lack of precipitation from the previous months, June and July. Wind speeds also remain relatively consistent in the Columbia Plateau during the summer months, adding to the conditions. The list of references that were used in the making of this presentation.